cold kind of weather. So anyway, welcome everybody. So it's a nice sunny day here, which is great. And lots of regulars already joined, which is fantastic. So I will first of all dive into a couple of housekeeping bits and pieces. First of all, to get just make a couple of things I want to talk about, and then I will dive into the questions. So a couple of questions coming in already, so I will dive into those. So just a reminder, this is a live stream. Everything that you hear on this is going to be based on live questions that are posted. So really important, if you do have a question, please leave a question in the chat with the word question in front of it, so that I know that it's a question, so it doesn't get lost in the various chit and chat amongst everybody. If you're watching this afterwards, bear in mind this is a live, and so you can sort of click through and look for the kind of little questions, because you'll see they come up on the screen. But I wanted to get into just a few bits and pieces of housekeeping as everyone kind of joins and settles in and we get going. I thought I'd talk very quickly about my next two cruises, because they have a bit of a theme to them. So a cruise that I'm doing, I guess 3 weeks from today, which is, I'm heading off on Paul and Carol Love to Travel group cruise on Sky Princess. I think this is my third, maybe my fourth time on Sky Princess. And I'd sort of gone off Princess a bit with the last, I had a series of Princess trips, and I felt they'd kind of lost a bit of their mojo, if that's the right word. So I'm really keen, because I'm going on Sky Princess, as I mentioned, on Paul and Carol's group cruise, which is a Scandinavian itinerary. I've been to all, except I haven't been to Skagen before, but I've been to the other ports. So most of them I'm going to self-explore in. And then in June, I have a bit of a land-based thing just before that. But then the week before that, but then I'm joining Sun Princess. Now I'm very keen to try Sun Princess. There's obviously their new big kind of mega ship. I think it's 4,500, 4,600 passengers. Sky is about 3,600. So I, as you know, a bit skeptical, not a massive fan of mega ships, but really intrigued to see what Princess have done with that. So I'm going to be trying also their sort of, I've forgotten what it's called now, but their sort of sweet kind of, their attempt at a ship within a ship, and see how that compares overall. So those are my next two cruises in May and June, and I will talk a little bit later once we get into those. I did want to talk about two really key little promotions and offers that I have coming up. So a little while ago, I saw advertised on social media this thing here, which is called, it's by a thing called the Wonder Club. And the concept behind it is you collect these little tokens, which they do by country or city or national parks and stuff. And there was a couple of things I thought they could also do some more cruising focused ones. And also I did get a little bit addicted to this, collecting them. As you can see, I've already collected all these for my last 3 cruises, all the different countries I've been to. So anyway, I reached out to Kenny, who set up and run Wonder Club. And we spoke a little bit about some future cruise opportunities. But what he was very kindly did is he's given me a number of vouchers, which I'm going to do a giveaway draw on. So if you go to tipsfortravels.com/giveaway, you should go to a WooBox page where you can enter this to win one of the, there's 3 of them, $125 vouchers against buying, this kind of little combo. Obviously, you won't get this exact one. You'll be choosing your own cities or whatever. So that's tipsfortravels.com/giveaway. That should take you to the WooBox page. I'll also put a specific WooBox link in below. The reason what WooBox is you put your name, your address in, and then it enables me to, I use that as an online thing, and it chooses the winners. So it's very fair and whatever. I don't choose the winners. It chooses them randomly. But also, if you're ever interested, by the way, you can get a minimum of 10% up to 30% discount with the wonderclub.com/TFT. But do think about doing that giveaway. It runs until the 14th, so roughly 2 weeks before that runs up. And a lot of people had asked me, it appeared on my video wall, this thing here, which is the Cunard drawing, which the Cruise Master just launched. So I just thought I'd mention that as well. But as a reminder, so tipsfortravels.com/giveaway, because the WooBox is one of those funny little complicated URLs. So I've put that there. I'll remind you, as I said, I'll put it in the link at the bottom. And they are really quite addictive and quite fun. And there's lots of things I've been talking to him about that maybe I'll hopefully talk about in future things. So let's have a look at some questions coming up. So Megan had posted a question. I have a drinks package on a Holland America cruise. seems to do coffee, but not tea. Panic. As an Englishwoman, do I need to take tea bags on board? How do you get through to Che? Well, Megan, there is tea bags all over the place. So you'll find them in like the Lido, but you will certainly be able to get them. If you go, to my recollection, you always get tea. So there's tea you'll find in like the explorations, depending which ship you're on, the explorations lounge, EXC center, and so on. They will have tea bags there. They have both herbal teas and regular teas. And I certainly have used my drinks package in the past to get tea. So unless something's changed that I haven't picked up on, but it shouldn't panic. I know some people when they travel do take tea because they like Yorkshire tea or PG tips or whatever. I never take tea, although I do like rooibos, which is a South African tea, which luckily a lot of the cruise ships have. Mr. 71, when do I expect to post Explorer Journeys review? So I am working on that at the moment. I can look at my little plot planning. Let me have a look see at that. At the moment, they will appear probably not towards the end of May. They may be a little bit before that. So towards the end of May, they will appear, and there will be probably 2 videos that I'm working on, one of which is a kind of a tour of the ship and a review of the ship specifically, and then the whole Explorer Journey experience. At the moment, I've got a script which is like over half an hour long. So tomorrow, one of my big tasks is to scrunch that down. So because I want to kind of get a bit snappy, I don't like making videos that long. Try and get it down maybe to 15 minutes. I need to get it down to half the size. So that's basically when. So someone making the point. I have 4 videos about Explorer Journeys. Just to explain what Sherry's meaning there is. So what I do when I go on trips is I do sort of on the cruise chats, thoughts, reviews, which helps me get my thoughts together, but also just to bring patrons and channel members on. So it's not, so you have to be a channel member or patron to get those. I know they're not for everybody. Everyone doesn't want to be a channel member and patron. So I do those kind of, so I do have 4 videos to write about Explorer Journeys. So my initial impressions, some reviews, answering questions, stuff. So that's sort of more sort of on the go stuff as well. So there is that as well. Rhonda's back from Oceania Regatta. Fantastic to hear that you had a great time. And got a Vista suite, which is fantastic. So yes, bidding is, so Rhonda bid and got a suite. So Linnea here, good to see you here. Have you ever had a Panama full/partial transit cruise itinerary completely cancelled or changed? So Linnea, it happened, in fact, my very first group cruise that I planned to do, I had originally targeted a partial transit on the Rotterdam. So that would be back in, I guess, 24. And it was, they were being very slow at confirming it. And then they completely canceled the whole, they redeployed Rotterdam. So I did have that canceled, but that was more a function of Rotterdam being redeployed. So that's why we ended up, because I'd asked people to hold the dates or suggest people hold the dates. And so so that's why we ended up doing the Eurodam Caribbean trip. And you may be asking this because of, with some of the challenges I think Panama Canal still has, because I think it's still in a sort of a drought phase. So they have been cutting back a little bit on the number of transits, affecting more commercial container ships, which is also why the price has rocketed up a lot of container ships transiting. But that's the only experience, which was more a repositioning, I think, than specifically linked to Panama Canal, because they canceled the whole lot. So I haven't seen anything, certainly, and I haven't picked up ongoing things. I know I did pick up, I think it was some Norwegian ones. They decided they weren't doing Panama Canal, maybe linked to the cost of transit and stuff as well. But that was a while ago. Coach Tracy Miller. Hi there, Coach Tracy Miller. I'm considering yacht cruising like Emerald or Winstar. Any recommendations? Are they worth looking into? So certainly, Coach Tracy Miller, they are 2 very different experiences in many ways. Emerald is very much on the sort of ultra luxury premium end. So they're very, and they're designed to look almost like a private yacht. So they're very upmarket, very upper end. Now, I haven't been on those. They do look to me to be very costly per night, but they are small ships. I can't remember how many passengers there are, but they're sort of the Ritz-Carlton, kind of yachts kind of experience. They're sort of operating that very high end. Then you've got Winstar, which are, they are definitely smaller. So they have 2 types of ships. They've got the old seaborne ships, which they've actually extended, which I think are about 300 passengers, if I remember correctly, something like that. And then they have the sailing ships as well, a couple of sailing ships, which they've actually just refurbished and look very nice. So definitely, if you're looking for, on the much smaller side, certainly, Coach Tracy Miller, you'll find Winstar way more affordable. It's still kind of small ship luxury pricing, but it's dramatically more expensive than an Emerald. So that's to me, that would be a good way. And now I really like Winstar. The passengers on Winstar tend to be very adventurous, very interesting. They're very focused on the destinations. There's not a lot going on the ship as such. The food's pretty good. It's not, you're not going to remember the food particularly, but they have a partnership with James Beard Foundation, so the food is pretty good. So I would take a look at Winstar, certainly, just from an affordable perspective. But if you do have loads of money, do take a look at something like Emerald. The competitors, you've got Ritz-Carlton in that sort of yacht space. You've got Scenic, which is the sister company. So Scenic and Emerald are the same company. They're also very high end. And then you've got, of course, Four Seasons coming. You've got the Orient Express coming, so there's a lot of action in that yacht space. Critical thing also to look at, by the way, when you look at these yacht things, is inclusions and exclusions. With Four Seasons yacht probably being the biggest in terms of exclusions. It's almost running like a hotel rather than a cruise. But Winstar's great. I've got a couple of videos on Winstar because I've been on Winstar quite a few times over the years. So Rick B on MSC Preziosa. That's I went on the original maiden voyage of MSC Preziosa. Jeffrey's here, which is great to see as well. Michelle B, Norwegian, Fjords, or Iceland. Wow, that's a real either or. My kind of gut reaction would be, if you've never been to either, I would probably start with the Norwegian Fjords for a couple of reasons. One of which is they are incredibly beautiful, which is a good reason. Secondly, you can get a wide range of options. So no matter what your budget is, you're going to find more affordable cruise lines going there through to your more premium cruise lines. So you're going to be able to get lots of different kind of experiences in the Norwegian Fjords, and it will generally be less costly than going to Iceland, generally speaking. Also, you can do quite a lot in a period of time. So you can even do, week-long cruises to the Norwegian Fjords, but there's some very nice intensive ones that you can do, which are longer. You've also got, Hurtigruten and Havila, which are both the sort of very locally focused cruise lines. So you have this massive choice. Also, they do run a lot of nice winter excursions if you want to see more winter stuff. A lot of cruise lines will often offer, particularly in the seasons like October, time, just when it gets darker earlier or heading out of winter, they will do Northern Lights cruises. A lot of them will guarantee Northern Lights. Now, Iceland, I really like Iceland. It is quite costly to go there, but it's more, it's beautiful in a different way because it's way more rugged. It's basically, the fire and ice thing. And there's some really interesting kind of excursions to see, the bubbling mud pots and the geysers, and what is it with it? I've forgotten the name of the place now, where the tectonic plates are pulling apart. So it's more rugged and stuff. And there are some quite nice, circumnavigation ones. If you want to go to Iceland out of Europe or the UK, you do need a good 2 weeks. You can do that there. You say, because you need a couple of days to get there. Now you can actually, so that's with I would start on the Norwegian Fjords and then sort of plan to go to Iceland. But you can actually do both. So I have done, in fact, on Winstar, I have done a Winstar cruise out of Edinburgh, which went to the Norwegian Fjords, then went on to Iceland. So you can actually find quite a lot of cruises that will do both, because a lot of ships will reposition in that sort of July, August time, when it's the peak season in Iceland. And they have to get there, obviously. So some of them will go via the Norwegian Fjords. And that was quite a nice combination. I think I did that on Star Breeze, I think it was, if I remember correctly. Let's have a look. Diane asking the question. We finished our Explorer cruise in May in Fusnia. So Fusnia, for those who don't know, is the port, which is sort of, smaller ships can get into the sort of the container port area, just off on the mainland, I guess, opposite Venice. Finding it hard to find public travel options to our Grand Canal Hotel can help with Explorer for transport to Venice. So Explorer will definitely offer you some options. They will offer standard offer. What they were certainly doing on the cruise that I've been on, other ones I've looked at, is you can book a specific car which will take you to a specific hotel. They do have some other transfers. So you will find once you're on board, there are options. Diane, the other thing to look at is, and I don't know if they operate in Venice because I'm not sure what the options are, but there are other transfer options like Black Lane, for example, may offer options. But Explorer will offer some options for sure. Now, when I went to Fusnia, I have only been there the once on my Viking cruise, and we had this really, because they hadn't built the terminal thing in Fusnia yet, so we actually had to check in at this ghost-like terminal, which was where the ships used to go to, and then Viking bussed us there. But I think Explorer will have definitely some options for you for sure. Let's have a look. See the world. Good to see you again. What's your favorite and least, I guess you're saying least favorite type of cruising and why? River or ocean or expedition or sailing ships? Thank you. So my least, I don't really have a least favorite type of cruising because I love all type of cruising, but I guess you're saying in terms of relative terms. So I would say a lot of it depends on, this is one of those, a lot of it depends on kind of questions. So I'm going to sound a little bit like I'm going roundabout to answer your question. But if I was roughly to say, I find expedition cruising phenomenal, but it's not, that would probably be the top of the pile, if you like. But I wouldn't want to go expedition cruising all the time because, first of all, it's incredibly expensive, expedition cruising. It's very intensive as well because it's pretty tiring. You come back from an expedition cruise kind of exhausted because you're up early, you're going to talks, you're going out, you're hiking, you're doing your zodiac tours, whatever. You're learning a lot, you get lots of lectures. So it's but it's just, you go to these incredible places. Like I've been to Kimberley, I've been to Greenland, I've been to Svalbard, I've been to Antarctica. But so that's, for me, is kind of the top of the pile. Then the next part would be, ocean cruising. And I love ocean cruising. Particularly trying to find new different destinations to go or trying new cruise lines. And there's so much you can do. That's why I like it is, I have a huge list of, even though I've done 121 cruises and I've been to loads of places, I still have a list. I don't know what this can do, but on my notepad, I have a list about this big. It's a digital notepad, and I keep adding places. And even today, I was looking at cruises that I want to do, and so I just can't even find the time. Or there's a new cruise line, or I haven't sailed on sailing ships yet, and it's on my list. So I just have so ocean I love because it's there. Then probably third would be river cruising. Now I love river cruising in more exotic places, like the Mekong and the Nile. I would like to do Mississippi, although I keep watching videos around and people keep telling me maybe that's not a good idea. But anyway, in terms of European river cruising, I do have, it's probably my lowest of all, because I do find it, although it can be, well, I'll come back to that, but I do find it a little bit kind of structured. I do find river cruising much more like escorted travel, bus travel. And it's just more limiting. Now I know that river cruising is evolving, becoming more contemporary and so on. So I haven't been river cruising since the pandemic. So actually in July, I know I spoke at the beginning of cruise, but in July I've booked a river cruise on the Rhine because I haven't done a river cruise. So I want to go back and revisit river cruising because there's lots of new lines and so on. So maybe I'll kind of re-energize it. Now river cruising, just a little spoiler, is I'm currently sort of negotiating Sarah's doing it for me, it's travel agent Sarah really. We're working with a different number of cruise lines to look at doing a river cruising group cruise, in October 2026. So, because I do, it is a great experience. So that's probably sort of the ranking overall. One of the things I would like to try, by the way, which I haven't tried, is going on working ships, container ships. Now that was before the pandemic. I'd actually had one booked. And it actually got cancelled, unfortunately, at the last minute. This is where you have fewer than 12 passengers. The reason for 12 is because once they go over 12, they have to have things like a doctor and stuff like that. But you actually just go on a kind of a container ship or a freight ship. And I would really like to do that. just in the pandemic, I researched it quite a lot, spoke to some people who'd done it, and it did look really, really exciting. So that may be on the list somewhere as well. Just want to write the word question so I don't miss that. Here's one I didn't miss. Manuel Alejandro Rosa Menderos. Hopefully I didn't get my pronunciation horribly wrong. Greetings from Panama. I love Panama. I find Panama very exciting. How do you compare your last cruise experience, Crystal and Explorer, as UI? And I think it's Manuel says, I did Crystal last November and Explorer last March. So very interesting, because that is the thing that I'm wrestling with. So I'm actually going to make a video, because I'm going to ask you about my Explorer videos. I am going to make a video because a lot of people ask me to do it, and also I want to do it myself to help me also get my thinking more structured. Comparing those sort of luxury and the sort of ultra luxury lines to each other. What do they do well? What don't they do well? And so on. So, you know, and I've been thinking a lot about, because obviously I did Crystal, and then I went on to Explore Journeys. So I found it Crystal, I loved Crystal, and I really, really enjoyed Explorer. And I actually have cruises booked back on both of those. Both of those actually, interesting enough, repositioning cruises, partly because it's a more cost-effective way of going back on those lines, because as you know, repositioning cruises tend to be a little bit less costly. So I booked Explorer 2 repositioning in April from Miami to Barcelona, and Crystal, which I booked online, incredible price. It's like half the price of Explorer Journeys because of the deal they were doing at the time, from Barcelona to Miami. So I found Crystal probably more sophisticated overall than Explorer. Just, you know, they are obviously, you know, although with all the hiccups of them going bust, or Genting going bust and then being bought by Abercrombie and Kent and so on, but most of the crew came back at all levels. And so they were very much more on their game when it comes to things like service, attention to detail. The crew, of course, know each other incredibly well, because a lot of them have worked for years. They've only worked for Crystal. And so there's a very deep rooted Crystal way of doing things. And the attention to detail, people getting to know you, was just phenomenal. Now the ships, obviously, you know, Explorer's ships are in another league compared to Crystal, but I quite liked the, you know, the sort of the more oldie worldy charm, if you like. That's probably a bit unkind because they've revamped the ships. So I just found Crystal, it felt more sophisticated, it actually felt more upmarket. It felt more luxurious, and it's hard to put your finger on, because a lot of it was just about the way things were done. You know, great food, you know, great service. You really felt pampered. You really felt kind of like people knew who you were, no matter what you did. Explorer, I mean, the ships are obviously in another league. Beautiful ships, magnificently decorated, really thoughtfully designed. Obviously, the Crystal ships are much older, so some of the layout, and I guess over the years with refits and stuff, maybe the flow's not quite as slick. With Explorers, you know, very slick. You know, things are the way it looks, it feels very plush. Food very good, way more choice than you get on Crystal in terms of dining, but it felt much less luxurious in many ways. You know, it partly the service was not as on the same league as Crystal, but just overall, because it was bigger, there was more passengers. You know, we had 720. The ship obviously takes 922, so it wasn't completely full. But you know, it did feel just busier, and so on. So they were both great experiences, but for me, they're very different things. Crystal to me still feels like the most pampering of the two. Explorer just feels the more modern of the two, if you like. So it just felt it had a little bit more buzz about it, I guess. And I wanted to spend time kind of, you know, doing that for all the lines, so I can say, here's where I think they exist. Mike and Carrie are together. Oh, great. So Mike and Carrie are together, which is fantastic. So Mike and Carrie remain 547. They've been spending they've been in different parts of the world for, I guess, months now. So that's fantastic that you're both in North Carolina. So it's good to see you both there. Well, not see you because I can't see you, obviously, but good that you're both together. So I know how tough it is being apart a lot. Question, really a statement. Sherry, yeah, Sherry was due to be on the Paul and Carol's having hip replacement, so that's very unfortunate. We weren't. Sherry and I have been booked on various different cruises, but I think we designed the universe is telling us we're not supposed to cruise, because something always comes up and we end up not really having that. Rhonda, you got Explorer journey booked in October, just got off Ocean Regatta. The entertainment on Explorer is terrible. It really is terrible. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit. Oceania entertainment is actually better than Explorer, in my opinion. I'll dive into it much more in the video, but basically you have, entertainment is clearly not an area where they're focused, in my personal opinion. So they have some singers and a live band. So good news, it's a live band. They do a series of concerts, really. But it's sort of the concerts you would get in, say, bigger mega ships, or even in America, where you've got the band singing, they might have a themed evening. It's a themed evening. The thing I find very interesting, and this is, I know people probably tell me off because I focus on this a little bit too much, but if you look at Explorer and who they're targeting, they're really sort of in their, in their interviews, they're really going after Gen X. So Gen X people are kind of 45 to 59 is who they would really like to have on their ships, which is why they focus much more on being more like a boutique hotel, why they have the kids clubs, why they have lots of kids promotions, while kids under whatever free, over 6 they have 50% fares. They're really encouraging families to come on board, because that's, I guess, that age group more like to have families or multi-generational travel. So they are kind of going for a kind of a younger vibe than the baby boomers. At the moment, certainly on my cruises, probably more equally split baby boomers, Gen X, I would probably guess. But and the older end of Gen X, although there was quite a few families on board. Anyway, getting sidetracked. But the shows then, they did Motown, Billy Joel, Rat Pack, and it's like, doesn't make any sense if you're going after Gen X. Why are you doing like those shows? So they did one disco night, but again, disco is kind of 70s, 80s, more my generation. So they have that, and they have the usual guest entertainers that have popped up. I've seen them on Celebrity, whatever. They're on that same circuit. They have a little bit of live music. A lot of people ask me about dancing. They play some dancing tracks in one of the lounges, which no one actually went to. I don't know, was there little people did dance up in the Explorer lounge up on deck 11. In the evenings, they'd have the pianist or the guitarist. So some people do a little bit of dancing there. So certainly the ballroom dancing is not really high on their priority. Again, maybe because of who they're ultimately targeting. They do daily trivia, which wasn't that well attended, but maybe that's also because we had quite a multicultural group. Although apparently Americans were the biggest group, but there's lots of Dutch and German and some, maybe it's more American, UK, Australian thing, I don't know, trivia, but I don't know if that's true. So you had one trivia. What they did have is they have port talks, which are very good, that they have those. Now we had Karen, who's cruise ship Karen, who is on for a couple of months. She's excellent, really, really good. In fact, she's going to be a guest on the podcast in a couple of weeks' time. I can't remember which week, I think the 13th of May, if I remember correctly. Anyway, I'll publish about that. But then I'd have some people who that I know who are on Explorer One at the moment who said the guest port talk is not that good. But they do have a dedicated port talk, which is not done by the excursions group. So that's really good. Then they have some enrichment speakers. So the entertainment's not great. You don't expect anything better than Oceania, I would say. They do have a slightly bizarre thing as well. They have live music in the evening in the lobby, but they have whoever's doing the music, whether it's the pianist or whatever, up on the sort of first floor, but the bar's downstairs. So they're kind of almost like piped music because you don't really see them and interact with them. Very strange. They need to bring them downstairs. Let's have a look. Anthony, what are your thoughts on Norwegian Cruise Line putting Oceania into the ultra-luxury category with Regent, but as a pick your own amenities as opposed to Regent's all-included amenities? Putting Oceania into the ultra-luxury category with Regent, but as pick your own amenities. Anthony, I'm not sure that I have really seen that as such. I need to maybe explore that a little bit more, because certainly with my Oceania trips, I haven't seen that as such. And I don't think that's how Norwegians see it. They see Oceania in the small ship luxury category. But I know that Oceania keep chopping and changing their various programs. So I need to look at that, come back. But that's certainly, I didn't pick that up. So maybe I'm missing something on that. Sorry about that. I can answer that better. Echo Bravo. Have you ever had feedback regarding National Express to Southampton for a cruise? The reservation for a return trip seems very inexpensive for Terminal 5. So yes, I have had a couple of people. In fact, Hetty, I don't think he's here today, but Hetty, who's on a big kind of world cruise voyage at the moment, I met up with her at Heathrow before she got the bus down. So she's done it a couple of times. I know other people have done it. They rate it very highly. It's pretty frequent and reliable. And it's quite easy to get a taxi then from where National Express goes. But you're right, it's incredibly inexpensive. And it's, but certainly people, I haven't done it personally, but I know people like Hetty, who's a big frequent traveler, you know, swears by it. She spoke very highly of it. I'm trying to think who else did it recently. Somebody else I know did it recently, but yeah. So definitely, it's definitely something worth a look at, and it seems pretty kind of reliable. A couple of people obviously on the Sky Princess, which is great. Debbie, I have not done a National Geographic expedition yet, but certainly they come very highly rated. They're obviously Lindblad National Geographic is one kind of entity, so they are very well regarded. Now, one of the things I'll do a punt for it, I did a video which I got some help from Polar Routes, from Martin Johnson, who runs one of the co-founders. He set up Polar Routes, where we did a deep dive into, I think it's 21 of the expedition groups, and sort of rated them all based on their facilities and stuff. So if you, Debbie, if you want to get, there's a PDF that goes with that, so he dives into it, compares them. So if you go to the channel, just go to the Tips for Travel channel, and when the search, if you search Antarctica, you'll see a video there called Antarctica on a Budget. So I talk through kind of how you can do it, but there's also a link there to the PDF which dives into that. I would love to do, I mean, if it helps, I would love to do a National Geographic expedition, and I would love to do a Quark expedition, particularly on their new ship, although now that they're also chartering one of the Atlas ships, they appeal. So they're definitely on my list. Let's have a look. See, yeah, that's right. It costs about $250,000 for a cruise ship to transit the thing. HNL Girl 11. I have not done Northern Lights cruise. I've done Northern Lights, but as a land-based activity in Finland, seeing the Northern Lights. So I haven't. It's also on high on my list. I'd love to do a Hurtigruten Northern Lights. In fact, I actually, talking about that, I actually have torn out. I just got in the post today. It's a lot of cruises thing. I actually do have from Hurtigruten this little letter here, which is their Experience the Northern Lights cruise, which I actually have on my, tore out of the brochure to have a look at to see how I can schedule it. So because I really wanted, I also want to do the sort of wintry kind of combination of snow and stuff. So I haven't done it yet, but I have there in my little pile here of cruises to look at, actively look at. Okay, so I get asked, Sheila, thanks for the question. I get asked a lot about Easter Island. I haven't been to Easter Island yet. I think I'm doing Easter Island when I do this Christmas. I'm doing Easter Island, so I don't have any recommendations. But I have a feeling that, unless she's not here today, because then she's moving back from heading back from Japan, is Rosemary, who's one of my followers and patrons as well. She has some good tips for East Island, I seem to remember. But if anyone has good East Island tips, please leave them for Sheila, and also it'll be very helpful for me. Someone asked this question before a couple of months ago, and someone, I feel it was Rosemary, posted the answer, but I can't remember the answer. Asking the question, have I done narrowboat? I have done, that's a good question actually. If you're talking about my ranking, I did a canal boat cruise with across Europe in France on their ship called Deborah, which I think, if I remember correctly, is 15 passengers. I was the only English speaker on it. Nate, I didn't speak any other languages. I understand a little bit of French, and I absolutely loved it. It was just fantastic. I would really do it again. So it's not as narrow as the UK ones. It's a little bit bigger. It was fantastic. You know, even though I was the only English speaker there, the crew, tiny little crew. I think the chef and maybe 2 people, if I remember correctly. But the tours were great, really immersive. It was fantastic. I loved it. Really, really loved it. So that would definitely be, I almost would put that a little bit above river cruising in a way. I mean, I guess it's hit and miss. If you don't get on with the other people, that would be a nightmare. But that would be, yeah, so that would definitely be on the list. And at the moment, probably a little bit above river cruising because it was just so great. Barbara, hi, good to see you again, Barbara. We're looking for a 3-weekish cruise in fall 2026. Prefer small ships, Viking regulars, but we'll try others. Resubmitted. So, Barbara, coming back to this question we had before, the topic we had before, Explorer Journeys is kind of one to look on the list, but I would also take a look, at your Oceania, and I would take a look at Winstar. Those are the ones that I would look at. Azamara, of course, within the mix, but I tend to, Azamara is a little bit hit and miss. Yes, and even I haven't been on Azamara for 2 years now. I need to get back on there because I'm still getting very mixed views. People who've been back on Azamara, some people tell me they love it, it's getting better. Others say they're not so sure. So, but definitely, so you've got to explore journeys now. Although pricing is now, certainly because I was looking at 2026, pricing is now much more up at your kind of ultra luxury level. So you're talking around $770 per person per night kind of pricing. So quite pretty costly. Viking is pretty costly as well. But take a look at those. So in fall 2026, one of the things you might want to do, Barbara, is I don't know if this would appeal to you, but if you're talking about fall 26, you're really talking about the opportunity to do repositioning cruises, which tend to be 2 weeks or so, but you can then tag that on. But reposition that time of the year will be ships moving back from the Mediterranean to the Caribbean. So for example, I've got that one in November 2026 on Crystal, which is a phenomenal price. It's a 16-night cruise going out of, I'm sure it's Barcelona, it might be Lisbon. And it's, in fact, let me just check. I said Barcelona earlier, so I'm going to just check on my little thing here where it is. I beg your pardon, it's from Lisbon to Fort Lauderdale. So I was totally wrong. I said Barcelona to Miami. So earlier. So that's, what's great is you could also do a little bit, before that, there's a cruise before that, for example, which will do a bit more Med, or you could do a little bit more Caribbean at the end. The advantage with those is you can go on some of those, more costly ships like Explorer, Regents, Crystal, that kind of stuff. And it was probably more, you may be able to get it for the price of Viking. Now, there might be too many sea days. The other thing that I would say to look at is that is a very good time of the year to be looking at Japan. So October, November is really, quite a busy Japan time. It's a really good time to go to Japan. It's still very warm. So like I went in October, then went again recently, sort of March time. It's kind of cold, not kind of cold, it was cold. Whereas October's beautiful weather, not too hot, not as crazy busy time. So that's also quite, because you've still got a couple of ships doing that. And you've got some ships coming back. So the other thing you can do is you've got ships going from although it might be a little bit too late by fall, but ships going from Alaska, some of them will go reposition down to Japan. So for example, I'm doing one in August this year, August into September, which is Silver Nova repositioning from Seward in Alaska. It has 1 or 2 Alaska stops, then it has about 5 or 6 Japan stops, but it does again have that 6 sea days in the middle. So but do look at some of those repositioning, because you can do some repositioning, very cost effective, and then do some deep diving. So you could do, kind of Alaska and see some Japan or whatever. So those would be my initial thoughts. Hopefully that helps. Calvin asking the question, any port or cruise line recommendations? For example, for Alaska, many people, including me, suggest Holland America Princess because they're more access to Glacier Bay. You're right, there's about 6 lines or 7 lines that the Parks Authority do give licenses to. You've got Holland America Princess, Norwegian, Seabourn, Cunard, and Viking, I think is the ones. In my Norwegian video, I do that. In my Alaska video, I talk about that. So in terms of Norwegian fjords, so a lot of it, the advantage with the fjords, Calvin, I probably, if you were here earlier, you heard me discuss some of it, but you can get pretty much any range of cruise lines. So the good news is you can get almost anything. I recommend going on smaller lines. So like the last time I went there was on Winstar, the thing I was mentioning earlier when I did sort of repositioning thing. But I would also strongly, I always encourage people to take a look at Hurtigruten and Havila, which is their new competitor, which are very focused on Norwegian. They do very intensive Norwegian deep dives. So they go into like loads and loads of ports. So they'll call like 30 ports during the course of the day, during the course of that week. But obviously you only get off in some and that sort of stuff. That's that's really what I would focus on if you really want someone that is completely ingrained in the region, Hurtigruten and Havila, Havila, because they are originally set up by Norwegian, or both of them actually owned by private equity. Havila is not, but Hurtigruten is owned by London-based private equity now. But it's it's a Norwegian operate. Norwegian is everything about it, and so those are the ones I would absolutely look at. Because if you're looking for someone that really knows the place inside out, but because most cruise lines have been going there a lot, they all really do know it pretty good. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Someone's asking about, are there any alternative taxes at the moment? There aren't, but there are. There aren't. People asking about, are there any more politically motivated reciprocal tariffs coming in, like China's done to the US and so on, when it comes to trade? When it comes to actual people entering, there's nothing specifically related to the politics, certainly at this stage. But what you are seeing, which is and RU. So what you are seeing, though, is you are seeing quite a lot of places bringing in taxes because of over-tourism. So it's driven by a different feature, a different function. So it's not really related to trade tariffs or trade wars or whatever. So, for example, Iceland have introduced a new tax, which is for every port a ship calls in, the tax has to be paid per passenger. And I can't remember the amount, but it's quite a lot. It's something like 14 euros. So, considering you might call in 5 or 6 ports, that's a lot of added cost. Mexico have introduced a very large tax on all cruise passengers going in to fund infrastructure and so on. This was done pre any trade war stuff. You've got, obviously, Venice has their tax for both land and cruise passengers to go into Venice based on per day during the season. You've got various different other countries introducing different taxes. One of my videos I dive into that. So we don't really know what the shakeout from the Mexican one's going to be yet, because it was quite hefty, and it wasn't clear about whether cruise lines will call on fewer Mexican ports because it's going to add a lot to cruise fares, or what. So it's not. There's none specifically related to to that. It's more related to they want to reduce tourism, or they're effectively a tourism tax driven by different things. Tansi, any plans to go on Virgin Voyages? Yes, absolutely. The plan at the moment, it's a penciled in plan, is in October 26. I really want to go on Brilliant Lady. So Brilliant Lady, when it's coming back from its Alaska season, is doing some sailings sort of end of September into October. So from about mid-September to mid-October, roughly. I can't remember exact dates. It's going to be based out of Long Beach, California. So I will actually be in the sort of California area in sort of September, October time. And the plan is to then book Brilliant Lady. I'm just waiting for that to know exactly what before I lock it down. So that's the plan. So it's penciled in, kind of hard pencil, almost pen, for one of those sailings. I think it's actually the end of September. I can't remember. There's a couple of ones there. So the week-long sailings, kind of that Mexican port, kind of Puerto Vallarta kind of stuff. So yes, that's the plan. So asking the group cruise, group will be in a European river cruise. Susan asking, so the river cruise, we're looking very much at Europe. Mekong will be great, but it gets very complicated and costs get more complicated. But you're right. So it's going to be more, we're talking to a European, probably the Rhine, although we're still discussing between the Rhine and the Danube. Hopefully, Debbie, I've answered your question there. Lisa's GTO, have you been on the cruise that are selling us? No. Would you recommend a particular line? I would definitely look at 2. The one I would actually focus on, to be honest, is I would focus on Winstar. but there are obviously Star Clippers as well, which is probably a little bit more rough and ready, if you like. But Winstar, certainly they've upgraded some of theirs recently. They look fantastic. I really, really want to do it. I just keep trying to slot it in, and it hasn't quite worked. But that's kind of the one I kind of lean on. And I've forgotten the name of the third one. The Star Clippers. Oh my goodness, I've got the other one. But I would focus on, that's one I'd focus on, to be honest. I would focus on that one. Ferengi Abroad. So I'm assuming that's a Star Trek reference. Hopefully it is. I'm a big Star Trek fan. Hello from Oregon. What is your favorite cruise line going to Alaska, and what is your favorite port? Well, my favorite port, when you ask me Alaska, I will end up having very favorite ports, but probably my favorite port, sorry, Lisa, I realize I didn't answer the second half of the question. I'll come back to that. My favorite port is actually Skagway, because I love the train. I love the White House Yukon train. I'm a complete train geek, which is what reminded me I hadn't answered Lisa's question. I absolutely love the Skagway train. I've been to Skagway 3 times. I've done the train 3 times. And if I went again, I would probably do the train again. And it's very unadventurous for me, but I just love the train. I love the history, I love the story, etc., etc. But I do actually also really like Juneau, because in Juneau, I love going up it's not called the Mount Roberts tramway anymore. No, it is called the Mount, because it was called something else and then it changed the name. Anyway, the tramway that goes up Mount Roberts, which I love the views. And that's where I normally go completely crazy, blow my budget, and do a lot of the glacier, walking on glacier, dog sleighing on glacier. So in terms of favorite cruise line, I actually really enjoyed doing Viking in Alaska. And I'll tell you why, was more because when I've done it on Princess, I've done it on America, and I've done it on Viking. And Holland America and Princess are fantastic because they go into Glacier Bay. The particular Viking I didn't go into Glacier Bay, but it was because it was a seawood to Vancouver, and I got to see some ports I hadn't seen before. The reason I liked it is, when you go to Alaska, is you need to expect you're going to have a lot of families on board, and it's going to be kind of very full because there's going to be families on board. So there's going to be more, it's not going to be double occupancy full. And it can get a little bit manic. So even though I went in June, I went in May on one and June the other, it was just a little bit manic, to be honest. And I actually really enjoyed going on an adult only experience in Alaska. But certainly, because Glacier Bay is so important to go, if I was going for the first time, I have no regrets about going Holland America. I have no regrets going Princess, because I got into Glacier Bay. If I go to Alaska again, I will either do one that absolutely gets me into Glacier Bay, and if that's Holland America, then it would be Holland America. I'll probably lean more towards Holland America than Princess. They've been going there longer, and or I may do it completely differently and do it more expedition-like. So there is Hurtigruten does a very interesting Alaska itinerary, which actually, I think it might call into Juneau, but it doesn't call in any of the regular ports. And it's very much more expedition wildlife focused. And that's not quite what you asked. Lisa did the second part of her question. Will you do any other train journeys? I don't have any booked, but I really do want to do some. I want to do some more in Australia, especially. I would like to do the GAN again. And then they have another one, which I think is called the Overlander, which goes between Sydney and Brisbane. So I don't have any booked, not long ones booked. And I would like to, although it's not going to work out, I'm going back, I'm doing a West Africa trip this year, which ends in South Africa. And I would really like to have gone on Rovos Rail again, because it's a very long time. Although I think the Blue Train's up and running. But now I only have a week between that and heading to Sydney. So I'm not going to be able to do that. So let's have a look. Andrew, very interesting challenge. Retiring in a year, congratulations, I've never been on a cruise. Very interested in expedition cruises. What do you think of having an expedition for a first cruise? Well, Andrew, I think it's a great idea. And particularly if you want to do it as a way of celebrating retirement, because an expedition cruise is going to take you to an iconic place in the world. So if your aspiration is to go to the Arctic, to Greenland, to Kimberley, or what I would probably suggest, Antarctica, I think it's a great experience, because in reality, an expedition cruise is very different anyway to a regular cruise. So I don't know if you were here at the beginning, but earlier on when I was asked a question about how I rank them, expedition cruise yes, it's a cruise and it's on a ship, but it runs very differently. So the entertainment is the talks and the lectures. It's not the song and dance, and yeah, they might throw in a bit of trivia and stuff, but that's your entertainment, is learning and education. And you do things almost as a group. So you'll be up at you might some days have to be up at 7 because that's what time your group is going out to go on to land on in Necker Harbor and do your allocated hike or whatever. So it's a very different structure in many ways, and certainly as an experience, it would just be magical. Particularly if there's a place in the world that really appeals to you. Now, you're obviously going to, if you do something like Antarctica, you are throwing yourself literally in the deep end, because you are potentially going to be crossing Drake Passage, and that might be your first time experiencing kind of rough seas, and that might be quite overwhelming in some ways. But you can just prepare for that, get some anti-sickness medication, and just see it as part of the adventure. You can do those fly cruise things as well, but I think it's a great idea. I think expedition cruising, but it is because it is so different as an experience. So that's key. That's key. Randy, hi there, Randy. Good to see you here. How would you compare the sailing experience of Crystal versus Regent? Randy, that comes back to, guess if you were here earlier, I want to do that video where I break it all down. So for me, they were very close. I do think Crystal probably edged ahead slightly, just in terms of the quality of service and attention to detail. They are really, really, really on their game. Again, as I mentioned, because they only have the 2 ships, most of the crew have worked together forever. Even the new crew are kind of really, it's very intensive. They have the Crystal way, they're trained, they're on the ball because they can. They've got 2 ships in a very tight community. And so it just felt even more kind of special. Now, what you don't have on Crystal is you obviously don't have the included excursions. So you have, the cost of those on top. Crystal, certainly for alcohol drinkers, wine lovers, has, from what I could see and what I compared with the documents I got, Crystal has an even bigger array of included wines. I mean, the wine list was enormous. Every night at dinner, they would still come with your red, your white, and whatever. But if you said, I don't want that, they had this massive list that you could choose from. The booklet with, the gins and the brandies and the whiskeys and the rums and the vodkas was, again, ginormous. So they sort of upped a little bit on that. Certainly the Crystal ships, because these are old ships, but they're very beautifully redone. Particularly Navigator, soon to be leaving. I have a soft spot for Navigator, but and I know Grandeur because you're on Grandeur. But their ships obviously are just newer, modern, smarter kind of stuff. Although the revamped cabins are very nice. So actually, I would say like the cabin I had on Crystal was probably one of my favorite cabins I've ever been on. And I did quite like that, still sort of not completely quirky, but still more quirky layout. So they're very close. So I need to get my head around which I think is better, but because they both have about the same amount of choice of alternative venues. They operate very similar. Crystal does a better afternoon tea, actually. I like the way the Crystal does the afternoon tea. Which they did a little bit more with your little tiered stands and things, or they did do some more buffet style when they did themed things. But they are kind of pretty close. So to me, they're kind of quite interchangeable. But Crystal just feels a little bit more sophisticated. I think I mentioned that earlier. So they, for me, they are slightly interchangeable. The other thing I would say though is the advantage, of course, is Regent having a slightly bigger fleet, is they do have more itinerary opportunities. Crystal are still relatively limited. What Crystal do tend to do is they keep moving so that you can bundle things together. I did 1 or 2 excursions with Crystal. I did a lot of self-exploring. Their tours were quite costly, but the tours they did offer were pretty good. I did a really good Shanghai one, which was really good. Sherry, so Crystal, yeah. So basically, Crystal has a kids and teens club area, but it's not run on every cruise. So they only open it when they have, basically in peak school holiday season, if they have kids booked. Whereas Explorer Journeys has currently one club called Nautilus Club. It's only one room at the moment, which is open for 6-year-olds to 17-year-olds, and they split that by day. That's on Explorer 1 and 2. And Explorer 3 and 4, they are actually going to have a separate Nautilus Club for kids and a separate Nautilus Club for teens. And what the lady told me is they're also talking about introducing a Nautilus Club for under 6-year-olds. But when I looked at the deck plans yesterday, I was looking at the deck plans yesterday, I was just finalizing some of the script, is it doesn't show up yet as a Nautilus toddlers, kids, young kids club. It's only showing as kids and teens at the moment. And they run the program on every sailing because they pretty much have kids on every sailing. We had, because Tenerife, actually people left and people joined. So we had, I think, 16 kids on the first leg. We had 24 on the second. The cruise after me was going to have 53 kids. So that's about 10% of the passengers in reality. But in the Caribbean, they were sailing on the peak, school holidays with 78 kids. Again, over 10% because ships weren't sailing full at that time. So absolutely, they are much more focused. You're right. The lady who runs that I met running the Nautilus Club had moved over from MSC. But Crystal does have a kids club, but it's very, it's kind of on demand basis. It's not something they go out and push. Although I have seen them run some promotions for families, but not to the same degree as Explorer. Explorer very, if you look at the Explorer site, they do talk about how they welcome everyone of all ages. And the Ponte family are very family focused. They believe a lot in the importance of family. Will we see loads of kids on Explorer? In the school holidays, I think we will see more than people expect. So one of my tips, and those who joined on the live stream when I spoke about it, is I would personally, because I prefer a kids-free environment, I would not book an Explorer journey in peak school holidays or peak holiday time, because I would want a more kid-free environment. So we didn't have a lot of kids. We did have some, because there's only one adult sort of space. They don't have adult bars and restaurants and things. So we did have kids, because particularly I was in Europe, so kids maybe stay up later. So we did have kids like at 10, 11 o'clock at night in the music venue and stuff, playing hide and seek, which drives some people crazy. But anyway, that may just be that particular sailing and particular family. Let's have a look. Okay, Trevor, I get asked this a lot. I do need to find some. I'd like to buy a good quality model ship. As you know, I've got this very beautiful Queen Marie 2. I have a very beautiful, I do show this every now and again. I probably should be on a lower level because I keep doing this. A very beautiful QE2. The person who makes those is long gone, unfortunately. I do not have any recommendations. So if anyone ever finds a good quality model ship source, I keep looking on eBays and stuff like that, but there seems a big kind of gap because I feel like the people who make those big, when you go on a cruise, they always have that big model of the ship, which I guess was made by the shipyard. I feel like there's got to be an opportunity to do those. I would love those. So I don't, but please, if anyone has great recommendations, please let me know, because I would love to be able to recommend any. Let's have a look. We're rapidly running out of time. Rashika, just got off the Regent Splendor, loved it, fantastic. What difference in cruise line can I expect on Silver Muse next month? Rashika is pretty similar. They have a slightly different thing that you'll find on Muse, is they've sort of moved away from the main dining room concept. So that's probably one of the biggest changes you'll notice, is they then have, you don't have like the main dining room, so you don't have like compass rows that you would have on Regent. So they have the different restaurants, so you could sort of move between those restaurants, which is very in these days. Like Explorer Journeys again doesn't have a main dining room; they have 2 restaurants which you don't make reservations for. The other thing, of course, you've got the included excursions. You'll also tend to find that Silversea is more dressy. So of all of those ultra luxury lines, I found Silversea the most dressy. So if I'm going on a Silversea cruise, I do pack a suit and I do pack a jacket, and I'm more like to wear those. I never wear, unless I'm in the mood for it, on Regent. Like on the Christmas cruise, we decided it was Christmas and we'd get dressed up in a suit one day. But certainly you don't have to on Regent. On Silversea, there is more of a dress code, and certainly if you're going to Silver Note, you have to wear a jacket if you're a gent into Silver Note. So it's a little bit more dressy. But other than that, it's fairly kind of similar. You know, they are kind of the same. You know, similar kind of profile of passengers, that kind of stuff. So if you love Regent, I think you will like it. But you like to find it just a little bit more dressy. Looks like Rosemary's answered Easter Island. I think I missed that, which is good. I missed that Rosemary had done that. Fantastic. Thanks for that, Rosemary. Really appreciate that. Darren, 2 weeks today, I'm going on my very first cruise on Avia. I've pre-booked my shows today, but my confirmations all only show my name is booked, but not my partner Norma. To be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure, Darren. It's possible that it's linked to your cabin booking, but I would absolutely contact P&O to clarify. Definitely check that. I haven't seen that happen, but it could be that they have linked it. But I would absolutely contact P&O customer service and absolutely clarify that. Let's have a quick look. We're rapidly running out. Let's see if there's any quick questions I can get before I need to wrap up. Ferengi board, super Star Trek fans. I don't know if you've been watching. I want to go on a Star Trek cruise and I keep messing up my dates, getting it wrong. They've just posted a whole series of videos with highlights from, I think it's number 6. I think they're now taking bookings to number 7, which if you haven't watched that, it's worth taking a look at. SL, are changes to itinerary become more common and are any lines more likely to also cancel routes than others? There have been a spate of cancellations affecting 2026 with redeploying ships. And what's been quite interesting is most of the cruise lines that are doing it seem to be moving more ships into the Caribbean. Certainly there's a very robust demand in the Caribbean for sailing, and particularly of shorter sailings. So a lot of cruise lines are introducing, much to people's annoyance who want longer cruises, lots of 3 and 4 night cruises. I read some stuff which the cruise lines are talking about in Sea Trade, which is a big industry event which happened, I guess, earlier this month, or was it March, in Miami, and they were asked a lot about that. Caribbean is very robust, and they're attracting a lot of new to cruise, and they're finding the short sailings are very popular. So there was a couple of Norwegian, there's a couple of, I think, Carnival, but they had some new dry docks arranged. So I'm not sure that's becoming more common. There was a little bit of redeploying of ships, which probably have now settled a bit. Of course, it all hinges on whether anything breaks out. So, as you know, massive disruption with the whole troubles in the Middle East and the Houthis. Now, what will be interesting is quite a few ships I've noticed are showing for their 26 world cruises and some of their 26 itineraries is requires them in getting their ships through the Suez Canal. So if the Houthi issue hasn't resolved, we'll see any cruise line that has that on their schedule having to change and reschedule. So that's the one to look out for. So if you've got cruises booked that say you're going to go through the Suez Canal, or you've booked cruises that are a little bit in Asia, or trips are going from Asia into the Mediterranean, going through the Suez Canal, I would watch those with some caution and keep an eye on the Houthi thing. But we're not seeing anything specifically at this point in time. And there's nothing yet looming that I've seen, but you know, the world is kind of a little bit crazy and things keep chopping and changing, but I haven't seen anything. Well, we have churned through time enormously. So next week is a long weekend here, and next Sunday is actually my birthday. So I probably will run a live stream, although we're actually going to be sort of away, but I will probably run a live stream on Sunday, but watch out for that. I'll post on Friday and confirm if I'm running a live stream, but it won't be here. It'll be in a slightly different venue. So have a great week. Remember, I'm going to do last little punt. Remember, do take a look at entering the Wander Club giveaway I've got. So tipstravels.com/giveaway. I'll actually put a link down here as soon as I've finished, and you can get discounts going to the wanderclub.com/TFT. If you put TFT in checkout, you'll get guaranteed 10%, but based on what you've ordered, you're probably going to get even a higher discount that of 30%. They've got lots of promotions on at the moment as well. So have a look at that. Have a great rest of the week, and I'm going to have a lovely, hot, sunny week here in the UK. Take care.